I remember telling my ex-boyfriend that I've got a girlfriend, and his response was, "Oh man, I actually made a girl gay. Now I'm gonna have to tell all my mates." And I was like, well, I have been dating other men since you. And he was like, "Yep, that doesn't count. I made you gay." Yeah, the guy sure didn't lack confidence. Imagine holding the power to change a person's sexual orientation just because you're not that great in bed. But in truth, I am bisexual, always have been, even though I managed to be very naive about it growing up, thinking that every straight teenage girl, when looking for a bra on Victoria's Secret online, end up with an orgasm instead. But apparently not so. Had a moment of thinking I was gay when, after having dated and loved men for over 10 years, fell in love with a woman for the first time, thinking, seems I must have been living a life of lies. But to my surprise, when I was single yet again, I was once more drawn to men as well as women, so my conclusion was bisexual. But that can be difficult to grasp, ergo why I'm here. So let's get the definition straight. Bisexuality is the quality of being sexually attracted not exclusively to people of one particular gender. This includes being attracted to multiple genders alongside those who do not identify with a gender. Not to be confused with pansexuality, which typically refers to those who feel an attraction to people regardless of gender. And even though bisexuality and pansexuality have a lot of traits in common, I will on this occasion refer mostly to bisexuality, even though there will be plenty of times where my statements will apply to both. I was 27 years of age before I was comfortable saying I am bisexual. I'm 30 now, by the way, so I've only been here for a good 3 years. And one of the reasons it took me so long was that growing up, I didn't know anyone who was bisexual, nor through my early 20s, and until I came out, I only briefly met one female and one male identifying as bisexual. So I never had any open conversations about being attracted to men as well as women, none other than with my straight friends about the stereotypical assumption of girls exploring same-sex attraction in their youth before they settle down with a man, like some sort of university ritual. So perhaps you can imagine my surprise when I later learned that about 50% of the LGBTQ+ community identify as bisexual, meaning it's the biggest group within the community. And let's even take it up a notch and compare on a larger scale. 3 to 7% of women and 3 to 4% of men, at least in the western part of the world, identify as bisexual. 11% state that they have experienced multiple gender attraction, and 8% of those have engaged in sexual behavior. So where are they all hiding? Even though there should be millions out there for me to talk to, I didn't have anyone I could relate to, so I turned to the TV, and I'll tell you how that went in a bit. After coming out and openly sharing my sexuality, I suddenly had friends coming out to me as bisexual. And maybe they would have done so regardless, but most likely they wouldn't, because research shows that bisexuals are less likely to come out to friends and family compared to people who identify as gay or lesbian. So it seems we were all hiding in the closet. But why are we so timid to step out into the world? One of the answers is rooted in media representation. Before I continue, take a moment and think about the last time you saw a bisexual leading character in a series or movie or even on stage. So not gay, not a supporting role, the lead. How many characters pop up in your mind? Yeah, not a lot, right? Considering there are about 7,000 TV shows, movies on Netflix UK alone. And if anything did come up, there is a big chance that their sexuality is traumatizing somehow. And the media is a powerful tool through which you can change society's notions, beliefs for better, but also for worse. And there are currently very few bisexual characters in media, and even fewer where they aren't portrayed as confused, gay, straight people. And this has effects for the individual in real life. Film professor Christopher Mackenzie outlines that the stereotypical portraits of bisexuals as being deviant, untrustworthy, undecisive, influences how bisexuals see themselves. It can make them think that something is wrong with them, that they're outside of the norm, they don't belong anywhere, they should change, make up their mind about who they find sexually attractive, and that manifests internally. I often feel like I'm not queer enough to claim my queerness. If I'm dating a man, I feel like I'm not doing my part to be part of LGBTQ+. If I'm dating a lesbian woman, I often feel I have to prove to them that I am really into women, that this is not just a phase. Despite the longest relationship I've ever had was with a woman, despite the last 5 years, I've dated more women than men, despite all of that, I am stood here talking about bisexual representation, still feeling the need to justify that I do have a right to be here as a bisexual. But not only does harmful representations influence how one sees oneself, it also influences how other people treat you. The anthropologist Mary Douglas outlines that people's realities come from social experiences. What we see and experience is what we become. So if we don't aim to a proper representation told from the lives of people who has actively lived their lives, then we create a limited experience of the world. And here are some of the social consequences. Every time I'm with a woman, never when I'm with a man, I am always scared we won't be taken seriously. Because even when nothing is said, we get a lot of looks. When we hold hands, people will intensely stare. And not so much because they want to, I think, but because they can't help it. It's still not normal to see two women in love holding hands. We've been catcalled on the streets. I feel like that one is too normalized for every woman, I should say. When we've kissed, we have had men placing themselves in front of us, saying, "Please continue, girls," as if we were the entertainment. Men and women have been throwing stuff at us and even clapping. That's a fun one. Men have offered to take us home to give us a good time. Very generous. But they should perhaps read the research mentioning how women come about 86% of times during intercourse in gay relationships compared to the 65% of times in straight ones. In other words, it would have given us more work, less pleasure to include them straight men. Men have offered to take us on dates well knowing we were in a relationship. A female couple I know had their entire apartment trashed and with words of faggots written all over their place. And two females my age were punched in the face inside a bus in Camden. And here's my last example. This is an interesting one, however not the most traumatic one. But one of my female friends said to my former girlfriend at a party that I was hosting, "If I were to kiss a girl in here, I told everyone that I would kiss you." And I was like, really? Well, funny you should say, because if I were to punch someone in the vagina this evening, guess who I would choose? But obviously I didn't say that. I am against violence. And also as a woman, I have been socially structured to stay quiet. So instead, I just grew internally angry. And at first, and this is the interesting bit, at first I didn't understand where this anger was coming from. It somehow didn't feel justified, because in my brain it didn't seem like a bad thing she'd said. But then I clocked it. At first it didn't seem bad because my partner was female. But had she said that to a male partner of mine, she would have been out of my social circles. So it was bad, because I would never say that to any of my friends' boyfriends, whether or not they're good looking or attractive, because I respect their relationships and them as individuals. She didn't. People simply don't give queer relationships the same meaning and gravity that do a straight one. And if you're bisexual on top of that, research shows that you face a higher risk of suffering stigma from both the LGBTQ+ community alongside the heterosexual community. Stigma such as, "This is just a phase," Or are you sure you are completely out of the closet yet? The idea as a bisexual, you can just choose who you fall in love with, so you could always take the easy way out. Others not believing you're bisexual because of previous relationship with men or women. Somehow you must be promiscuous, here to spice up the heterosexual man's sex life. And in some cases, your sexuality is simply not valid, which creates higher levels of anxiety and depression in bisexuals than it does in homosexuals and heterosexuals. It also leads to higher levels of suicidal thoughts and makes us more likely to act on it. So, I am sure there are a few in-the-closet bisexuals who are very excited to come out now, huh? But thankfully, times are changing, so better representation is starting to flourish. Atypical is a great example of a TV show that follows a female character called Cassie, exploring and discovering being bisexual without it being about her questioning whether or not she's straight or gay. Then we have David in Schitt's Creek, who identify as, I love all kinds of wine, not the brand. Fleabag, even though we do mainly see her with men, she's also attracted to women. Killing Eve, both leading characters have sexual and romantic relationships with multiple genders. And what makes these characters a great representation of bi pansexuals is that, first of all, their sexualities are never really mentioned. The struggles doesn't come from their sexualities. No, the journeys to overcome egos, become better people, to change, those are the stories that focus. And of course, a bit of killing. A good representation doesn't take away from the fact that there are still a lot of queer people who have difficult and traumatic experiences coming out. But what a healthy representation does is that they normalize LGBTQ+ relationships. And the effects speak for themselves. 1,800 mothers wrote to the cast of Schitt's Creek to thank them for everything the show had done for their kids. It said, in part, your willingness to explore, inform, and educate about LGBTQ people and their relationships in an entertaining but respectful and positive manner sets a tone that is often missing. They also go on to say that that show has made it a safer place to live as an LGBTQ person. Because when you see your favorite character out and proud, being supported and loved, you inspire people to take part in that for themselves and for others too. You create hope, not fear. You show how the world can be and how it already is. As co-creator Eugene Levy of the show says, the more you expose homophobia, the more you're giving homophobes any arena to see themselves. But if you remove homophobia, you're not giving homophobes any arena to see themselves. So, if the stereotypical portrait of bisexuals as being confused, straight, gay people creates mental health issues and harmful social structures, a healthy representation can do the opposite. One of the most powerful things in life is feeling seen and understood, and that can be gained through a good representation, through stories of love, hope, acceptance, through inclusive and diverse representations. And that goes for all representations. Because when we feel seen, we feel less alone. We feel normal. When we feel understood, included, we feel like we belong, which is what all humans crave, and which is what we all deserve. Thank you.